Welcome to Pastor Andrew's Inspirations. If you enjoy these videos, please click on the red subscribe button below and the bell for more. Welcome to our online church, a congregation made up of many from around the world. No offering is necessary. Subscribing and watching videos will keep us alive under God's watchful eyes. Today we will be learning about the ancient city of Gibeon. Gibeon was a Canaanite and Israelite city north of Jerusalem, according to Joshua chapters 10 and 11. The pre-conquest inhabitants, the Gibeonites, were Hivites. According to 2 Samuel chapter 21, they were Amorites. The remains of Gibeon are located on the southern edge of the Palestinian village of al-Jib. After the destruction of Jericho and Ai, the Hivite people of Gibeon sent ambassadors to trick Joshua and the Israelites into making a treaty with them. According to the Bible, the Israelites were instructed to destroy all inhabitants of Canaan. The Gibeonites showed themselves as ambassadors from a distant, powerful land, without asking God in Joshua chapter 9. Israel made a covenant or peace treaty with the Gibeonites. The Israelites soon found out that the Gibeonites were actually their neighbors, living within 3 days' walk of them. Joshua then realized that he had been deceived. However, he kept the letter of his covenant with the Gibeonites to let them live in exchange for their servitude, deciding to have them assigned as woodcutters and water carriers, and cursing them to work forever in these trades. Theologian John Gill suggests that this curse was a particular example of Noah's curse on Canaan. In retaliation for allying with the Israelites, the city was later overwhelmed by a coalition of 5 other Amorite kings, led by Adonizedek, king of Jerusalem, along with Hoham of Hebron, Piram of Jarmuth, Japhia of Lachish, and Debir of Eglon. The Gibeonites appealed to Joshua, who led the subsequent victory over the Amorites and miraculous circumstances. These were truly under and amid miraculous circumstances, including deadly hailstones and the suspension of the movement of the sun and moon, until the Amorites were completely defeated in Joshua chapter 10. In the book of Joshua, ancient Gibeon is described as a large city, like one of the royal cities, located in the tribal territory of Benjamin, in Joshua chapter 18. It was given as a Levitical city in Joshua chapter 21. In the first book of Chronicles, Jael is mentioned as the father of Gibeon, and is an ancestor of King Saul. After the capturing of the Ark of the Covenant by the Philistines, the remaining part of the tabernacle was moved from Shiloh to the great high place in Gibeon. 1 Samuel chapter 4 and 1 Chronicles chapter 21. In 2 Samuel chapter 21, it indicates that King Saul pursued the Gibeonites and sought to kill them off in his zeal for the children of Israel and Judah. His anger at the Gibeonites was not personal hatred, but was induced by zeal for the welfare of Israel. Following Saul's death, fighting between the soldiers of Joab and those of Abner took place beside the pool of Gibeon in 2 Samuel chapter 2. It was in this area that King David conquered the Philistines. In 2 Samuel chapter 5 and 1 Chronicles chapter 14. David then became the king of the united monarchy. Much later, after the death of his rebellious son Absalom and his restoration to the throne, Israel was visited by a 3-year drought, which led David to ask God what was wrong. The drought was then revealed to be divine judgment against King Saul's decision to completely exterminate the Gibeonites. In 2 Samuel chapter 21, in his zeal for Israel and Judah, the blame for this genocide is also attributed to Saul's family. This event is not itself recorded in the biblical narrative, although Gill refers to a Jewish tradition linking this slaughter to the slaughter of the priests of Nob in 1 Samuel chapter 22. The liability of Saul's family in the genocide could also imply that it wasn't a singular event. David asked the surviving Gibeonites what he could offer to make amends. In retribution, they asked for 7 of Saul's male descendants to be given to them to kill, 7 signaling the sign of completion. David handed over Armoni and Mephibosheth, 2 of the sons of Saul, and the 5 sons of Merab, Saul's daughter, to the Gibeonites, who hanged them. He saved Jonathan's son, also called Mephibosheth, from this peril because of his covenant with Jonathan. In 2 Samuel chapter 21. Amasa was also killed here in 2 Samuel chapter 20. On his accession to kingship, King David's son Solomon met with all Israel's leaders at Gibeon and offered 1,000 burnt offerings. In 1 Kings chapter 3 and 2 Chronicles chapter 1. On this occasion, God appeared to him in a dream in 1 Kings chapter 3 and granted him wisdom as well as in 2 Chronicles chapter 1. Hannah, son of Azur, came from this city in Jeremiah chapter 28. After the exile of the Israelites to Babylon, Gibeon belonged to Judea. 1 Chronicles chapter 16 suggests that worship before the tabernacle at Gibeon continued alongside worship in Jerusalem after David brought the Ark of the Covenant back there. Although nothing is said of this in the books of Samuel, theologian Hans Peter Matthes notes that no other Old Testament book mentions a regular sacrificial cult in Gibeon. Its historical authenticity is sometimes supported by the argument that in 1 Kings chapter 3, Solomon went to Gibeon to sacrifice there, for that was the great high place. 1,000 burnt offerings did Solomon offer upon that altar. This confirms its existence and speaks out against it. It is more likely, however, that these 4 verses were conceived by the chronicler, who is at pains to portray an uninterrupted and legitimate sacrificial cult spanning the entire period from the desert era with this tabernacle, including the Lord's residence at Gibeon, right up to Solomon's establishment of the temple in Jerusalem. A 2017 paper suggested that the biblical story of the Israelites' victory against the Amorites over Gibeon, where God made the sun stand still in Joshua chapter 10, may be identified with an annular eclipse which occurred on the 30th of October, 1207 BCE. In regard to the Gibeonites and the killing of 7 descendants of King Saul, according to the Babylonian Talmud. As to the Nethinim, however, let them be summoned, and we shall pacify them. Immediately the king called the Gibeonites, and said unto them, What shall I do for you? And wherewith should I make atonement? And ye may bless the inheritance of the Lord. And the Gibeonites said to him, It is no matter of silver or gold between us and Saul, or his house. Neither is it for us to put any man, etc. Let 7 men of his sons be delivered unto us, and we will hang them unto the Lord. He tried to pacify them, but they would not be pacified. Thereupon he said to them, This nation is distinguished by 3 characteristics. They are merciful, bashful, and benevolent. Merciful, for it is written, And shew thee mercy, and have compassion upon thee, and multiply thee. Bashful, for it is written, That his fear may be before you. And benevolent, for it is written, That he may command his children, and his household, etc. Only he who cultivates these 3 characteristics is fit to join this nation. But the king took the 2 sons of Rizpah, the daughter of Ai, whom she bore unto Saul, Armoni and Mephibosheth, and the 5 sons of Michal, the daughter of Saul, whom she bore to Adriel, the son of Barzillai, the Meholathite. Why just these? Arhuna replied, They were made to pass before the holy ark. He whom the ark retained was condemned to death, and he whom the ark did not retain was saved alive. But the king spared Mephibosheth, the son of Jonathan, the son of Saul. He did not allow him to pass. Was there favoritism then? In fact, he did let him pass, and it retained him, but he invoked on his behalf divine mercy, and it released him. But here, too, favoritism is involved. The fact, however, is that he invoked divine mercy that the ark should not retain him. But surely it is written, The father shall not be put to death for the children, etc. Hiabiaba replied in the name of our Johanan, It is better that a letter be rooted out of the Torah than that of the divine name shall be publicly profaned. And Rizpah, the daughter of Ai, took sackcloth and spread it for her upon the rock. And the beginning of the harvest until water was poured upon them from heaven. And she suffered neither the birds of the air to rest on them by day, nor the beasts of the field by night. But surely it is written, His body shall not remain all night upon the tree. Johanan replied in the name of our Simeon, be Jehozadak. It is proper that a letter be rooted out of the Torah, so that thereby the heavenly name shall be publicly hallowed. For passers-by were inquiring, What kind of men are these? These are royal princes. And what have they done? They laid their hands upon unattached strangers. Then they exclaimed, There is no nation in existence which one sought to join as much as this one. If the punishment of royal princes was so great, how much more that of common people? And if such was the justice done for unattached proselytes, how much more so for Israelites? 115,000 men immediately joined Israel, as it is said, and Solomon had 70,000 that bore burdens, and 80,000 that were hewers in the mountain. Might not these have been Israelites? This cannot be assumed, for it is written, "But of the child of Israel did Solomon make no bondservant," but that might have represented mere public service. The deduction, however, is made from the following: "And Solomon numbered all the strangers that were in the land of Israel, and there were found 150,000. And he set 70,000 of them to bear burdens, and 80,000 to be hewers in the mountains." Was it David, however, who issued the decree of prohibition against the Nethinim? Moses surely issued that decree, for it is written, "From the hewer of thy wood to the drawer of thy water." Moses issued a decree against that generation only, while David issued a decree against all generations. But Joshua, in fact, issued the decree against them. For it is written, "And Joshua made them that day hewers of wood and drawers of water for the congregation, and for the altar of the Lord." Joshua made his decree for the period during which the sanctuary was in existence, while David made his decree for the time during which the sanctuary was not in existence. In Rabbinic Judaism, the alleged descendants of the Gibeonites, known as Nethinim, are treated differently from ordinary Jews. They may not, for example, marry a Jew by birth. However, a Natin may marry Mamzerim and Jerim, the men of Gibeon, with Melashah, the Gibeonite, at their head, repaired a piece of the wall of Jerusalem near the old gate on the west side of the city in Nehemiah chapter 3, while the Nethinim dwelt at Ophel on the east side. At the time of Nehemiah and Ezra, they were fully integrated into the Judean community and were signatories to the former's covenant. Several centuries later, their status had declined rapidly. In the 10th genealogical classes Yuhazin set forth in the Mishnah, they are ranked above Shetukim, people of whose paternity is unknown, and Asufim, foundlings but beneath Mamzerim, the offspring of the illicit unions, and were prohibited from marrying Israelites of good standing, though intermarriage between the last four classes, which included freed slaves, was permitted. A child of such illicit unions was defined as a Natin, whereas the biblical prohibitions against intermarriage with the Moabites, Ammonites, Egyptians, and Edomites only applied for a certain number of generations, or did not apply at all to their daughters. The ban on marriage with Mamzerim and Nethinim was deemed perpetual and applies both to males and females. The earliest known mention of Gibeon in an extra-biblical source is in a list of cities on the wall of the Amun Temple of Karnak, celebrating the invasion of Israel by Egyptian pharaoh Shoshenq I, 945 to 924 BCE. Josephus placed Gibeon at 40 furlongs from Jerusalem. The 10th century lexicographer David ben Abraham Alfazi identified al-Jib with the ancient city Gibeon, which view was corroborated also by the Hebrew lexicon compiled by Wilhelm Gesenius and Franz Bull. The first identification of al-Jib with the ancient Canaanite city of Gibeon was made by Franz Ferdinand von Troilo in 1666, and later adopted by Edward Robinson in 1838 in his biblical researches in Palestine. Later discovery of the al-Jib jar handles added weight to this identification. The remains of Gibeon were excavated in 6 expeditions from 1956 to 1962, led by the University of Pennsylvania archaeologist James Pritchard. Gibeon was founded in the early Bronze Age. The excavators discovered 14 EB storage jars beneath the foundations of the Iron Age wall. Other EB remains were discovered at the top of the tell, but the stratigraphy had been destroyed by British gunfire during the First World War. It is probable that there was a defensive wall, but this has not yet been found. Tombs cut into the rock on the east side of the hill contain EB jars and bowls, formed first by hand and then finished on a slow wheel. The early bronze city was destroyed by fire, but no date has been determined for this destruction. The Middle Bronze Age is known from shaft tombs on the west of the city. 26 MBI tombs have been found, but the crudeness of the pottery they contain indicates that the people may have been nomads, camping on an unfortified site. The remains are similar to those found elsewhere at Jericho, Lachish, and Megiddo. In Middle Bronze II, however, a substantial city with finely made pottery was found. 29 Middle Bronze II tombs have been found, apparently containing multiple burials as opposed to the single burials of the Middle Bronze Age I tomb. No trace of a late Bronze Age city has been found. Only 7 tombs are known from the period, but they nevertheless point to a degree of sophistication, as they contained imported Cypriot ware and local potters' attempts to copy Mycenaean and Cypriot pottery. It would appear that some, at least, of these tombs had been cut during early periods and were being reused. Pritchard suggested that somewhere in an area not touched by his 4-year dig, remains of the Bronze Age great city from the book of Joshua might still be found. The Iron Age was apparently the city's period of greatest prosperity. Wall, pool, and spring tunnel. During the early Iron Age, a massive wall was constructed around the crown of the hill, and a huge pool was cut in the living rock just inside the wall. In a first phase, it was cut with a diameter of 38 feet 8.5 inches to a depth of 35 feet 5.2 inches, with a spiral staircase of 79 steps cut into the walls of the pool. And in a second phase, a tunnel was added that continues downwards to a water chamber, 78 feet 8.9 inches below the level of the city. It is possible, but cannot be proven, that this structure is the pool of Gibeon in 2 Samuel chapter 2. Later in the Iron Age, another tunnel of 93 steps was constructed to a better water source below the city, starting from a point near the pool. A second access point to this source from the base of the hill is still in use today. The flat and fertile land with many springs which surrounds it gave rise to a flourishing economy, attested to in the large number of ancient jars and wine cellars discovered there. The jars could hold 11.9 gallons of wine each, and 66 wine cellars, 2 meters deep and dug out of rock, have been unearthed in Jib. In the 8th and 7th century BCE, there was a considerable wine industry there. Cellars with room for 25,097 gallons of wine have been found. Impressive among these finds are 63 wine cellars, Hebrew inscriptions of Gibeon on the handles of wine storage jars, most of which were excavated from a large pool matching the biblical description, made the identification of Gibeon secure, and a landmark product of biblical archaeology. Pritchard published articles on their production of wine, the Hebrew inscriptions, the rock-cut wine cellars, and the well-engineered water conduits that supplied the city water, from the 6th to the beginning of the 1st century BCE. There is scant evidence of occupation. During the Roman period, there was considerable building, including stepped baths and water conduits. Gibeon was possibly a dependency of Jerusalem, and was probably not fortified at the time. Eusebius, in his Onomasticon, mentions Gibeon as formerly being inhabited by Gibeonites, who were a Hivite nation, and that their village was located about 4 milestones to the west of Bethel near Ramah. The 10th century lexicographer David ben Abraham Alfazi identified al-Jib with the ancient city Gibeon, which was verified also by the Hebrew lexicon compiled by Wilhelm Gesenius and Franz Boll, and proved by Hebrew inscriptions unearthed in 1956. At a nearby ruin, built on the southern slope of a ridge, at the western side of the al-Jib highland, archaeologists discovered a Hellenistic Second Temple period dwelling, in which were found a plastered ritual bath with 3 descending staircases, and an industrial zone with lime kiln. This was the ancient city of Gibeon, or Gibeon. Adonai Nisi, the Lord is our banner. Remember, if you like these videos, please click on the red subscribe button below and the bell for more. God's blessings be upon this message and us all.